Okay. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I can't see me, so I hope you can see me. Um, you guys, we made it to session number 4. Welcome, and my name is Berlinda Blackburn. I am the Environmental Regulatory Programs Manager for, can you go to the next slide, please? For the City of Coachella Water Authority. The City of Coachella owns both its water and wastewater systems. And today we'll be talking about development and sustainability. You know, there are so many times when folks hear about new development coming in, new construction coming in, and they don't know the backstory as to how the process is done. And sometimes folks believe that, oh, we don't have water, why are you allowing, you know, this X, Y, and Z? So today we're going to go over those aspects of sustainability. And let's see, housekeeping. You're in listening only mode, we're recording. And are you familiar? It appears everyone is familiar with the chat box by this time, because I see everyone logging in. They're also, you know, showing who they're associated with. So thank you very much. Here we are next. We're going to, the background on CV water counts, you guys know this already. We're just gonna do a good morning and a good afternoon, rather, introduction. First, we have CVWD. Would you pipe on, Lorraine?
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hope you have a good session.
Jason?
Hi, everyone.
CVWD?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We're on the home stretch here.
Yes.
And yeah.
DWA?
Hi, everyone. Sochi here. So glad that everyone could join us for session 4. Geez, we're almost done. Yay.
Mission Springs.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Victoria Lort with Mission Springs Water District, doing programs in public affairs. I'm so excited with everyone else. One more session to go. Thank you for joining us.
Myoma. I thought I saw Michelle earlier. Do we have anyone from Mission Springs? I didn't see anyone on our panelist list. No? Okay.
Sorry, for Mission Springs, Berlinda? Victoria here. I spoke.
I'm sorry. I meant Indio.
Oh.
Indio. I'm a little bit distracted. I'm trying to do all of this. This was not easy, you guys, by the way. So welcome, everyone. It's our 5th year. This is our 4th session, and we're going to get started shortly. The first presenter is Louis Lopez. Louis Lopez is the director in charge of planning, building, and code enforcement for the City of Coachella. He is the city's environmental review coordinator and a liaison to the outside agencies. Louis has worked for the City of Coachella since 2008 and was promoted to director position in 2012. Born and raised here in the Valley. Louis has more than 30 years of experience in urban planning and land development in the profession. Prior to working for the City of Coachella, Louis worked for several Southern California municipalities. I'll let you guys read all of the rest of that, but the one thing I did want to say that Louis is in a band and he plays really good music and he loves to travel and attend family gatherings. Let's welcome Louis Lopez.
Wow, thank you, Berlinda, and Water Academy participants. It's a pleasure to be here. After being in Coachella for so many years and looking at the future with music in the horizon and possibly retirement later this year, I'm really thrilled. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Let's see if this will work. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes,
Say
we can.
Water Academy. Okay. So I'm going to talk about water supply planning. And what I mean by water supply planning is basically the California Environmental Quality Act, which is CEQA, which is a environmental assessment that's required for any project that is considered discretionary or has public funding and is not otherwise exempt from CEQA. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about water conservation as it has been implemented in the California building codes and the Cal Green Code, and some of the background of where this is all coming from and how it affects regional planning, water conservation in landscaping in particular, and all of these state mandates that have affected the way we do our day-to-day business. I'm going to start with water supply assessments and water verifications. You may or may not have heard of these, but in 2002, when this was implemented by the legislature, SB 610 and SB 221 were the two sets of statutes that established the requirements for connecting water supply review with CEQA. And CEQA is a planning tool. It's a public disclosure of environmental impacts to a new development project. SB 610 requires that the water purveyor, in this case it would be Coachella Water Authority because we serve the city of Coachella and our sphere of influence in thermal. It requires the water purveyor to prepare a water supply assessment that is part of the CEQA document. SB 221 is a more specific water verification for a specific project, and it's required whenever you do a builder subdivision or something that is very focused, because you'll find that a lot of the planning documents like master plan communities, large phased projects that have development agreements, they are more conceptual in nature, but they trigger the water supply assessment and may not necessarily trigger the water verification until a future date. The water supply assessment and verification, they're again required by CEQA. The Public Resources Code, California, contains the CEQA statutes. There is a set of guidelines that we follow, and every city and county can adopt their own local environmental review guidelines. The difference here is that the California Water Code sections now talk about CEQA, where before 2002 they did not. So there's a connection now between environmental planning and water supply. There's also a couple of sections in the Business and Professions Code and the California Government Code, which is inclusive of subdivisions, planning, zoning, and development laws, and public meetings, and all of that good stuff. The applicability of SB 10, it has a trigger, so it includes any residential development of more than 500 dwelling units, and that's typically the trigger point. Whether you're doing a specific plan or a subdivision, any big phase development like a Del Webb community or a Trilogy community, a master plan community like La Entrada in Coachella will trigger it. But it also is triggered for large commercial and industrial developments. The thresholds for those are typically shopping centers having more than 500,000 square feet of floor space, more than 1,000 employees, commercial office buildings over 250,000 square feet, hotels or motels having more than 500 rooms, industrial parks on over 40 acres is typically a trigger, and mixed use developments. The water consumption factor is a lot of times what may be the deciding factor whether you need the water supply assessment, because you may have a project that exceeds the water consumption factor equivalent to 500 dwelling units in your water agency, but it may be less than 500 units or even over 500 units, but it doesn't trigger the water consumption comparison. It's like an equivalent dwelling unit comparison. So in Coachella, we have a very high average household size. I think it ranges from 4.6 to 4.9 persons per household. So you're going to find that in Coachella, we have a higher water consumption factor. And a lot of times it triggers the water supply assessment, even if we make the project under 500 dwelling units. That's just one example of how it's implemented. As far as the Coachella Water Authority, I understand the group has learned a lot about the water basin in the Coachella Valley and the different water agencies. So I'm just focusing on our water agency. These are some of the statistics, the acre feet that we produce per year and the number of groundwater wells, the operating conditions. It is controlled by a SCADA system, which basically allows remote monitoring of the water wells and the functionality, so that people that are under contract to maintain our system, they get emails and they know what to do to the system remotely to keep it functioning. And we use approximately 5% of the total volume of water withdrawn from the Whitewater River Basin each year. So looking at the CEQA process, this is very big picture. There's a lot of intricacies to CEQA, but as previously mentioned, CEQA applies to any discretionary action. So that means if the Planning Commission or City Council has to review a project, like a tentative track map, a change of zone, a conditional use permit, an architectural review, or anything that has a grant, public grant funding, state or federal grants, any project like that triggers CEQA. Otherwise, there's a whole list of exempt projects. Farming is an exempt activity typically because agricultural activities are generally permitted by right in agricultural zones, so we don't look at the water consumption in that situation. The way we implement it is through a checklist, and there's a environmental checklist, if you've ever seen it. It goes through every environmental factor: aesthetics, air quality, bio, cultural resources, noise, soils, traffic is a big one, and then utility services is in there. And in the checklist, it gives you 3 options for each of the factors. The project can have no impact. It can have a less than significant impact if you implement mitigation measures. And that's a popular one for the smaller to mid-size projects where we adopt mitigation measures and don't need the environmental impact report. Or potentially significant impacts. And whenever you check potentially significant impacts, it triggers an environmental impact report, or an EIR, which is a popular term. So an EIR is the most involved procedure under the CEQA guidelines, most notably because it requires longer noticing periods, longer, more involved public engagement processes. The negative declaration is the more popular or second most involved CEQA document, but that process requires only a 21-day notice before the public hearing to adopt a negative declaration. And then we do a 30-day consultation with Native American tribes, and then what they call responsible party or agency request for comments. But altogether, the negative declaration can be processed in, say, 3 to 4 months, whereas an EIR, typically 9 to 12 months at a minimum. And the point of all this is that historically, CEQA documents did not require a detailed water analysis. Back in even in the 80s and early 90s, there were environmental checklists that didn't have a lot of findings of facts or detailed information about the environmental factors. In other words, if you said, well, this project has minimal impacts to water resources, you didn't have to justify it. But case law and the guidelines have evolved to a point where every response, even a no impact response, has to be justified quite substantially. And that's why they're so expensive to process, because you need expert testimony in the form of substantial evidence that a court could use to justify it in case somebody challenges it. And that's the big problem with CEQA, is that it's legislation that is built for people to be able to challenge it. You don't have to have any real connection to the project. Any citizen could challenge the environmental assessment of a project. Coming back to the water supply assessment's relationship to the city and to the local urban, what they call urban water master plans, which probably you've heard a little bit about. CEQA documents will always point generally first to the master plan for infrastructure. And it's kind of a known practice that an EIR is not supposed to address utility infrastructure necessarily, because each agency has their own master plan for growth and building out the system. So if we say, you know, this major development has a less than significant impact because it's going to implement the city's master plan for water and sewer in the form of building water wells, building sewer lift stations, and extending pipelines, that usually was the way to check the box. Modernly, what's happened is that the water supply assessment requires certification that this water will be available for a 20-year period, even during extended periods of drought. And that's where it gets a little tricky, because we have to talk about all of the water entitlements that the water wholesaler, which is CVWD, contractor, has in the Coachella Valley. And they have a lot of rights to water from the Colorado River, the California Aqueduct, and you probably have learned a little bit about that. The other thing is that the water supply assessment must be consistent with the purveyor's urban water management plan. And the water management plan is updated every 5 years, and it's supposed to be consistent internally with your growth assumptions. The problem there is that the growth assumptions are usually contained in the city's general plan, which is the 20-year plan for growth of the city or county. It's supposed to be updated every 10 or 12 years, but cities struggle fiscally to be able to do that, and a lot of times it's outdated. Or in the case of Coachella, you get a development like La Entrada that wants to build a 7,800 unit development in the middle of nowhere up in the hills, and we didn't really assume that growth over the next 5 years. But the EIR for La Entrada had to be consistent with the city's urban water management plan. The result of that is that any inconsistency between the water supply assessment and the urban water management plan will trigger an amendment to the UWMP before the CEQA document can be certified. Usually, because it falls close to the 5-year update period, you know, you can do it at that time concurrently, or you would just file an amendment to the urban water management plan. But we did have to do that for the La Entrada community, which is a large master plan project. And then in conclusion of the water supply assessment, there will be some findings of fact that talk about the availability of water over the next 20 years, even under multiple years of drought. And one of the big conclusions that we have is that the requirement of the Coachella Valley's water management plan, which is CVWD, requires that the other agencies pay a RAC, the replenishment assessment charge, for each acre foot that we produce from the basin. So the RAC is $52 per acre foot of groundwater pumped, and that's something that the city pays. Additionally, we do have cooperative agreements with CVWD to pay a surplus water, imported water surcharge, which is something that we have been working still to implement as an impact fee. And that's a condition of approval on a lot of the smaller subdivisions. So that concludes the planning, water supply discussion on CEQA and water planning. And then I'm going to move into just a brief presentation of the water conservation efforts in the California building codes, and notably in the Cal Green Code. The California Green Code was largely based on the idea of sustainable growth for California. It's the first in the nation mandatory green building standards code, and it was developed by the Building Standards Commission, who develops the California building codes. In 2007, the Green Code was developed as a result of AB 32, and AB 32 has a lot of other sustainable growth legislation attached to it, but it was under the umbrella of greenhouse gas reductions legislation. There are a lot of regional planning laws that affect how cities manage their infrastructure and housing development growth patterns. Under AB 32, for example, the Council of Governments, SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments, has to adopt a regional transportation plan and a sustainable communities plan. And it used to be that the RTP was adopted, under a different time frame, let's say every 10 years. And now they've changed it so that it corresponds with the housing element updates of the general plan. So it's basically this smart growth or regional growth assumptions for the purpose of creating more sustainable development in the form of reducing vehicle mile trips, making cities more compact, or creating pockets of density so that you can bring in public transit. And it avoids the idea of urban sprawl and reducing the need for expanding infrastructure into outlying areas that may not have the capacity for growth in the way the sustainable community plan is envisioned. So it's a lot to take in, I understand, but overall, the goal of AB 32 was to bring greenhouse gas reductions to 1990 levels by 2020. And every city in California by now has adopted a general plan that is consistent with AB 32, and it talks about like a climate action plan and things like that. The way all of this relates to water efficiency is that there is a connection. There is a connection to reducing greenhouse gas by making development more efficient and conserving more water in the actual built environment. So that it includes a majority of the water conservation in new construction in the California Green Code, but in the 2019 version of the California Building Code, which does reference the Green Code, every city and county has adopted this code effective 2020. It has very specific water conservation building requirements. For example, indoor water conservation for plumbing fixtures is required. Any non-compliant plumbing fixture has to be replaced. Whenever you do any minor remodel, you have to fix your shower heads, for example, your toilets. And these are the specific standards in section 4.303, that water closets can only use a maximum 1.8 gallons per flush. Shower heads have a similar maximum flow rate, 1.8 gallons per minute. And lavatories as well, 1.2 gallons per minute at 60 PSI. Kitchen faucets, again, very similar water conserving plumbing fixtures. Section 4.304 talks about outdoor potable water use in landscape areas. And this is where the legislation, the administrative code talks about the model water Efficiency Landscape Ordinance. MWELO is the acronym, and there is a Coachella Valley Water District model code that a lot of the water agencies have adopted. And what these have, you may have talked about this already, but it has a water budget calculator that looks at evapotranspiration rates of the plants and the drip irrigation system versus, discouraging spray heads that tend to evaporate the water quickly. There's an annual reporting that we have to do to the Department of Water Resources, and that requires staffing. So it's always a challenge because we don't have, for the city of Coachella anyway, like an internal water conservation staffer that reviews landscape plans or reports how many acres of new landscaping we've approved every year. But it's, again, one of these state mandates that we are subject to. There are similar requirements in section 5.303 for non-residential, commercial buildings and whatnot. So that is the end of my presentation. I know it was all over the place, but I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Louis, thank you very much. There appears to be a few Q&As coming in. If there are any questions, if you want to raise your hand so we can unmute you and you can ask your question directly, please let us know. And let's look at the first question here. I'm going to mute myself. My dog is barking in the back.
Okay, the question is, many California cities have adopted water reach codes requiring exceeding those in the Cal Green and building codes. The Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency has developed a version of MWELO that triggers lower than building code. San Francisco requires on-site non-potable water reuse for non-residential new developments at least 250,000 square feet. And Santa Monica has adopted a water neutrality ordinance for new building, requiring offsets when the new development is projected to exceed 5-year historical water use. Given the structural drought that Coachella Valley is facing, would these kinds of ordinances be useful in our area as well? That's a great question, David Freeman. Cities have in their climate action plan policies like this to implement reach codes that went above and beyond what Title 24 or the California Building Code requires, the Cal Green Code. And I think it showed a good effort. It probably avoided lawsuits because the Attorney General filed lawsuits regarding sustainability, AB 32, I know, against the County of San Bernardino and probably other agencies. The efficiency of those, I think, has gotten to the point where it may not make a lot of sense because the new building codes and the next cycle, which would be the 2021 Title 24 building codes, are going to require basically like a net zero home, which is going to address a lot of this stuff. So going beyond what's going to be required as a mandatory standard is going to be really tough, in my opinion. All new homes now have to have solar energy and water conservation and all of these great things. But I think there's a lot to be said for these projects that come in and show the ability to go beyond the reach codes. It does have a lot of implications for the building industry, and I guess that's a great segue for Gretchen Gutierrez.
Absolutely. That was a great transition. Thank you, Louis. I appreciate it. You providing us that vital information. Okay, guys, moving on. We're going to be, our next presenter will be presenting on, going to continue the conversation. We have Gretchen Gutierrez here, who's the CEO of the Desert Valleys Builder Association. Oh my gosh, this is hilarious. Prior to joining DVBA, she served as the CEO for Friends of the Desert Mountains from April 2010 to May 2011. The DVBA is the regional nonprofit trade association focused on the regulatory impacts to the building and construction industry. Her role at the DVBA consists of oversight and management of the association. Gretchen, welcome and thank you very much.
Well, good morning and thank you for inviting me back again. We were talking earlier today that we thought the first time I had spoken to the CV Water Academy was either your first or second year that you all were actually a program here in the Valley. So this is my second time around getting to address your participants and attendees. I am wanting to share my screen, and for some reason I'm getting a weird message. I'm hoping I'm not going to lose everybody here, so give me a moment here. We did try it earlier and it did work. Here we go. So thank you again for having me. And yes, Louis, thanks for that, Greg, segue. It is part of my discussion today about why it is so expensive to provide new residential housing, not just here in the Coachella Valley, but also throughout the state of California. And some of it is because we, every 3 years, go through a building cycle of housing updates and codes and standards. And so we had new ones implemented this last year. We're getting ready to start the process all over again here shortly, and it will continue to add to the impacts of construction. For those of you that don't know DVBA, and there are probably a few of you on this group call that do not know who we are, we tend to run a little under the radar here in the Coachella Valley, but we provide legislative and government affairs information and resources to the new construction industry, primarily in residential construction, although we do have members that are in the commercial and industrial applications. And we primarily look at codes and fees and ordinances throughout a number of agencies and the demographics of the 9 cities here in the Coachella Valley, Riverside County, as well as all of Imperial County. What you're seeing on the screen right now is our mission statement. I'm not going to read it. You can all read. I'm going to give you that opportunity. But more importantly, what we do is we are engaged with over 50 agencies, because every time someone goes to build in one of our local jurisdictions here, whether it's in the city or the county, they're engaged with that local agency as well as the school districts, the water agencies, air quality management groups, transportation, and a whole host of other regulatory agencies that they may or may not have to engage through the approval process to get support for their project, get it approved, and get it actually built and constructed. One of the things that we look at on an annual basis is what all of those agencies do with the funds that they receive from those applicants, how those are expended, making sure that they're expended in correct and appropriate manners under state legislative action under the Mitigation Fee Act, and that they continue to provide those levels of service that the applicant and then the end user, meaning the homeowner or the business application, are going to actually have as an end product to paying those fees. So just a little bit of other history as it relates to the industry in the state of California and housing. You know, we're coming up on a year that the day the state of California came to a screeching halt. Everyone was ordered to go home. Everyone was ordered to not go to school, stop all fun activities, et cetera, et cetera. And if you asked me personally, and if you asked anybody that had been in the industry any length of time, what that was going to do to the residential construction industry, both new and resale in the state of California, we would have probably, to a person, said, the industry is going to come to a complete stop. We won't sell a house for however long this is going to go on. People are now going to be hitting the unemployment rolls. We saw our food banks have a severe increase in number of people that were needing food assistance. So we figured people weren't going to be buying houses. They weren't going to sell their house. They weren't going to buy their house. But conversely, what happened was we saw a wide variety of different things happening. One, we saw a community that stepped up, especially here in the Coachella Valley. We saw a large number of groups form together to assist the local community. We as DVBA got very involved with Riverside County. We also got involved with all the chambers, the food banks, et cetera, in terms of exchange of business information, how to help people get the resources that they needed, whether it was financial assistance or food assistance, housing assistance, what have you. These are just some of the groups on the screen that you see here that we've been engaged with now for a year. I just this morning had 2 calls with regards to continuing assistance for the county task force. I'm somebody that sits on the county task force, and I sit on a regional task force, and we meet weekly or bi-weekly, or sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the situation, about getting us back and getting us out of COVID. Because again, we thought that we were going to have a severe impact on the housing market. Although interestingly enough, we were deemed an essential service for the state of California to continue to provide housing into the community. I will tell you this. Yes, we were provided the opportunity to be essential services. The challenge we've had is having the community recognize we still needed to continue to build. We've needed to continue to keep folks on job sites. We've needed to keep our tradespeople busy. We've needed the agencies to continue to process and service our applications so that we could continue to build houses, not just here in the Coachella Valley, but throughout the state of California, because the housing market went the exact opposite way than what we thought it was going to go. It went nuts. Everybody started buying and selling. The coastal communities started selling, and they started buying inland. The inland communities started selling, and unfortunately, they're moving out of state. So that's what's happening within some of our industries at the moment. So what happened to us here specifically in the Coachella Valley since COVID hit this last year? The resale market went absolutely crazy in the last 11 months. And a number of you may have participated or seen, and I'm going to get my hands on if you didn't. This morning, MarketWatch, who is an industry trade partner with us, presented their quarterly report on the resale side of what's happening in the market here. Some very great data as to what's happening, but the resale market's gone nuts, and probably all of you can speak to having somebody in your neighborhood or perhaps yourselves personally that have decided to list a house, and you're seeing lots of offers for it. You are seeing inventory at an all-time record low right at the moment. We are down now under a 30-day period on the resale market here in the Coachella Valley. We have approximately 1,000 homes on the resale market side across 9 cities that are available at this point in time. So there's a big drought in terms of the resale market and having folks have an opportunity to purchase a home through the resale side. It's not any different on the new home side. And in fact, it's actually a little bit worse. We're also down to approximately a month to 6 weeks. It's taking a long period of time in which for projects to get moved forward this last year. And I'm not going to throw any agency specifically under the bus. Unfortunately, the agencies have been a little bit slower to coming back into workplace compared to the business community with regards to moving projects forward. Projects have been selling out quicker than they thought they were going to. And then it means that their pipeline of getting projects started again, getting a building permit issued, has been a little bit slower than what they forecast originally to start with, or how they're actually able to get going, moving ahead. Some of it is because agencies are not still fully open and accessible, or they're having to go through an appointment process. We're having to still continue to do a lot of things through a Zoom conferencing, and it's put additional pressure on getting new product back onto the market. 2 weeks ago, as an anecdotal remark, 2 weeks ago, I had a call. In one day, we had 3 different projects across the valley, one in Palm Springs, one in Palm Desert, and one in La Quinta, all sold out. Excuse me, not La Quinta, it was in Indian Wells. All 3 of them had sold out. They have no more product left to go. The project in Indian Wells had virtually been open for 7 months. They were projected for a year to sell. And because they sold out so quickly, they didn't have anything further in their pipeline. Same thing with the other 2 projects, the one in Palm Springs and the one in Palm Desert. So it's pushed those developers behind the 8 ball to try and speed up their process and in turn speed up their application process with the respective agencies that they need to do business with. Most of our sales agencies are still working from virtual tours at this point in time. They are taking appointments. Some of them are actually open, fully open for folks to walk in. It's depending upon the relationship that they have with their senior developer, as well as the relationship with the cities. You know, we hit a gray area when we were all told we needed to stay home. Yes, we were told we were essential services, but at the same point in time, the dictate came down to say, close your sales offices, but yet build houses, but yet sell houses, but yet close your sales offices. So our selling community side of things have been in a little bit of a pickle in terms of trying to have accessibility to buyers to come in and physically walk through models and look at things right at the moment. That's not to say that they didn't shift and pivot very quickly, as did the resale community. They went out and started virtual touring everything. And there's, you know, thousands of hours of videotape out there right at the moment on any product that's available to be sold. But what we're trying to get back to for the sales offices, predominantly for new home sales, is having those sales offices open. So that people, if they're out on a Sunday afternoon, they can walk in. They don't necessarily have to have an appointment. So we'd really like to get those back open. We're also seeing that the majority of our buyers are California based. It's folks on the coastal communities over in LA, Orange County, San Diego, even up in the Bay Area. They went to a remote work from home. They're now able to sell a house in those areas, make a significant profit on those houses, and they can turn around and work in a new location. So they're choosing to relocate inland. And they're looking for someplace they get a better price for their next home. They're looking for a little less cost of living, change of scenery, what have you. They're coming out here to the Coachella Valley. Which drives us to, when will our snowbirds and seasonal folks come back out here? So right at the moment, we are seeing some come to the valley for purchasing. Not a lot. The Canadian border is still closed to us right at the moment for our Canadian friends to be coming down and visiting us, either whether they're homeowners now or wanting to come and see us just to visit and then potentially buy. Their border closure has been extended till the end of March. We'll see if that gets lifted at that point in time and if they come back into the market. We have a number of them that have homes here already. Some of them have been selling them. Others of them have been just letting them remain completely dormant throughout the season. That's having an impact on our local economy as well, because they're not coming to visit us. They're not buying and selling houses, nor are they renting them, nor are they coming in and also spending their money locally. So that's having an impact on us here in the valley at this point as well. And as I said earlier, lastly, our projects are selling out months earlier than we originally forecast because people have gone a little crazy with buying houses, which has exponentially increased purchasing at this point in time. So Louis had an interesting slide up a few minutes ago when he was talking about housing permits and numbers and what we're conditioned to do and things. And for anybody that thinks that we're building a lot of houses here in the Coachella Valley, that's really not exactly the case. We are, and I put up a slide right here. This shows what we did in 2019. These are single family permits that were issued. A permit is good for 1 year from date of issuance to get the project started or the lot started. And at the moment, you can see where we're not exactly pulling a lot of permits. We're not meeting a lot of the demand for new housing into the Coachella Valley right at this point in time. Several of the cities this last year did have really good years. Obviously, Cathedral City had a great year. Desert Hot Springs had a really good year. Indio has been a year over year pretty consistent of 250 to 300 or higher on a year over year basis for Indio. Indio's led the bandwagon for a number of years now as the most productive with new starts. La Quinta saw a good year, but then you saw some key cities of Palm Desert and Palm Springs that had some pretty significant drops, as well as Indian Wells. Of course, several of those cities do not have a lot of land available for them, specifically like Indian Wells for new construction. So that means that you have to be very targeted when you want to go into building new residential in Indian Wells. We see a lot of infill stuff in Indian Wells. Rancho Mirage was basically neutral this last year. Their big driver in Rancho Mirage has been the Del Webb project up off of Bob Hope and Dinah Shore. So that's consistently keeping Rancho Mirage numbers up for them. You'll also note that we are not building that many multifamily units throughout the valley right at this point in time. It is a key component to the RHNA numbers that we need to be starting to meet under the next 8-year housing cycle. And each city has now been given their RHNA numbers to meet, which will entail building multifamily housing units across the valley in order to meet those numbers for affordability factors. We're just, however, we're not building multifamily, and that's apartments or condos, townhouses, et cetera. We're just not building them here in the Coachella Valley. It's part of it's market driven, part of it's demand driven. Part of it is a challenge when you come into a city and you need to go vertical, and there's resistance from the community to be going vertical. So it's something that will be being seen more and more often, that we need to go high. And I'm not saying 64 stories up. I'm not saying we need to look like downtown LA or San Francisco or any of those type of places, but we are height challenged in order to meet our densities at this point in time, to meet our multifamily unit needs. So what does that mean as far as where we are with housing? So the last big housing boom that we had here in the Coachella Valley was back in 2008. And that was just as the building recession was getting ready to start. That was just prior to that. It was also when the prime market was very, very hot. The cities out here were all literally on fire of doing stuff. We did approximately 8,800 permits in the 9 Coachella Valley cities. And then the recession hit and the subprime market tanked and everybody fell off the map with regards to the housing industry. So what have we done since then? As you saw, I just put up the numbers that we had for 2020, but this is kind of what we've done since 2015. Those are individual single family housing permits. So when we hear on the industry side that we're having an impact on water supply, that we are causing the drought, that we are infringing upon the water usage of the valley, whether it's the Coachella Valley or the Southern California market or what have you, new housing is not necessarily doing that, folks. It really isn't, okay? One, because we have to build to new building codes and standards every 8 years. And a house that's built now is far more energy efficient, including in water, than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So we're far more efficient with it. We're also not building. Quite frankly, we're just not building. We're not able to get the number of units into the systems that we need to have right at this point in time for a whole host of reasons. But we're actually not completely the bad guys here in this whole process. We need to build housing. We need to build housing of all types, but we're just not able to do so right at this point in time. So yes, are we having an impact on water usage? Certainly, of course, anytime you add a new connection to a service line, you do have an impact on it, but we're not overburdening the system at this point. Why does it cost so much? This is one of the key slides that we talk about within the industry, is why does it cost so much to do new construction? And it came up this morning, as a matter of fact, on the Market Watch presentation. We can't compete with resale. When you go in to build a new house today, you're paying increased fees in cities. You're paying a lot of different dollar amounts to a lot of different departments at the various cities. Our land costs have continued to go up. Our construction costs are continuing to hugely rise at the moment. We're running into construction material shortages, which in turn drives the price of availability up. So we're having that problem. The length of time, Louis mentioned it as to how long it takes to get projects approved. That's all cost of doing business for the construction industry, but that in turn adds cost to the cost of the home. We have environmental challenges. We have challenges from the neighbors, the NIMBY challenges. Folks don't necessarily want to have new housing built next to them. They don't want to have affordable housing built next to them, or maybe it's a commercial center built next to them. even if it's zoned that way, even if the applicant is applicable to that location, all of those things add to the cost of the entitlement process, the development process, the construction process, and the ultimate end user having to bear the burden of all those costs. One of the things that we look at on an annual basis with all the cities and the agencies is what their fees are. We look at how those are passed through, what they collect, how they're applied, where they go to. And again, as I say, we make sure that they are applying them to their appropriate levels of service so that they continue to provide good quality services for the residents, for their businesses, and the community at large. Two things. We'd like to look at reduction in fees. Don't usually seem to have much success in that, but we'd like to look at those. And then the other thing is the expedition of moving those plans through the system quickly. Again, time is money. We're now in a shortfall again of building houses, which we did not foresee this year. We will be challenged this year to continue to meet the product need. And now, of course, everyone's immediately talking about the affordability factor again, and we need to continue to work for all levels of income to be able to be homeowners and or renters and have shelter. So water availability. So I don't have another slide to go along with this, but what I did do was I reached out to, and I wanted to first of all say thank you to Victoria Lort from Mission Springs Water District, because I know she's on the call here. I reached over to Victoria. We work with Mission Springs Water District, of course, also with all the other water agencies as well. And I reached to them as well as CVWD, and I asked them, you know, could you please supply to me some information as to your upcoming projects that you have within those respective agencies and districts? Because again, new construction is having an impact on the systems, but not so oversome that we're gonna overdraw the system. Okay, we're just not doing that. All right, if we stop building houses today in the Coachella Valley, the system is still going to be supplying water to the current consumers and residents here in the area. So to meet that need, what are the water agencies doing in order to meet the current need as well as sustain future growth and reliability into the system? So just to give you a few highlights, because both Mission Springs and CVWD supplied me with quite a long list of number of projects that they're currently working on. Within Mission Springs, they're currently working on their water reclamation facility, which will provide 1.5 million gallons a day of sewer treatment capacity. Nobody ever talks about sewers, but you also have to have sewers to go along with water. So that's a big improvement for Mission Springs Water District. They're currently drilling and outfitting a new potable water well, which will produce approximately 2,000 gallons per minute of water once it's available and online. They're also working on design for a reservoir, which will add storage capacity with a new 300,000 gallon capacity tank to go into the district, which will expand their reservoir number 2. And then they're working on rehabilitating 2 potable water wells to create more efficiency and long-term use for those and being more cost efficient on those rehabilitations. And that's up in Mission Springs Water District. So they've got within their capital plan and their infrastructure plan, they're obviously, and these are projects that take 3 to 5 to 10 years to do, depending on what the project is, the funding for those projects, what they need to go through from their requirements to make sure that they're building appropriately and safely, et cetera. Long-term planning, long-term projects, but they're all in the process in the planning works at this point in time to continue to expand and provide additional services for not just future development, but the existing folks up there through Mission Springs Water District. Over in CVWD, they're currently working on the construction of 3 storage tanks of 2 million, 6.5 million, and 10 million gallons respectively to provide additional services over in Thousand Palms, Cathedral City, Rancho Mirage, and Palm Desert. So that's going to be able to continue to supply service again for residential within those 4 regional areas. They're currently drilling a new well in Cathedral City that'll also serve not just Cathedral City, but Rancho Mirage. They're working on a rehabilitation of a treatment plant out on a well in Mecca. Again, these are projects for Mecca and the unincorporated areas of their service district. They typically take anywhere from 2 to 3 to 5 years. to start to finish until those projects come online. So it's long-term planning, long-term application work that they have to go through, long-term development, design, and construction before they actually have water services available. But they are working to deal with several of the issues out there in the Mecca area, including additionally a new transmission line out along Avenue 66 for the Mecca thermal area. They are also working in North Shore on a domestic storage tank and a booster station. Over in the Palm Desert groundwater replenishment area, they are working on the construction of 3 ponds to complete the design on that, and they will be delivering approximately 15,000 acre feet per year to those ponds, and that will be for replenishment, because not only do we take water out, but we got to put water back in, and that project should be completed in the next 1 to 2 years. And then lastly, one of the project notes that they sent to me was that they are currently continuing their transfer on the on the golf courses here in the Coachella Valley, converting them from potable to non-potable water. And they're going to be converting 4 golf courses here over the course of the next year or so. That's Oasis Country Club, the Palm Desert Resort, Woodhaven Country Club, and Bermuda Dunes. So not only are water districts in the process of building new facilities for continued growth in their service territories, but they're also dealing with rehabilitation, they're dealing with wells, they're dealing with treatments on if they have sewer as part of their portfolio that they need to deal with. They have to deal with those sewer treatment facilities, upgrading them, maintaining those type of things. And then they're also looking at all those areas that they don't currently have higher standards of water service in, such as the Mecca thermal area, which we hear repeatedly has issues with water infrastructure and needs of those residents and those businesses out in those areas. So they constantly are having to look at improving those areas and or even providing service to them. So those are just some of the highlights that those 2 water agencies are going through. Of course, we have a number of water agencies out here. Louis talked a little bit about what's going on in Coachella. We also have India Water Agency and Desert Water Agency and Bermuda Dunes and a few others out here. So there's always lots of things going on within the water district world and long-term planning of them. Couple last quick notes. We have actually done over the course of the last couple of months several different in-person presentations, one of which was an economic forecast. I can send that link to Berlinda and she can share it back to this group with it. It does talk about housing, not just in the Coachella Valley, but in the state and in the nation. It's and the ripple effect that housing does have as a benefit to communities. You can see it listed here, what we bring into the communities, what we do while that project is going forward, and then the long-term permanent benefit that those residents do bring to the community. Because we are an economic driver, folks. We are huge. People have to buy groceries and they, go grocery shopping and gas stations, et cetera. And one of these days we'll get to go back to movie theaters again. So at that point, we're going to continue to put money back into the system. This just tells you all who we're partners with. As you can see, we're very active in the community. A number of you work with us on a variety of different agencies and groups. So you see us out and about. And that's it, I think, at the moment. So,
Gretchen,
yeah.
thank you. Thank
You're
you very
welcome.
much. Can I say that the state of the valley's and activities is strong?
You could say that it's strong. I mean, we've seen enough, honestly, if you had asked me a year ago when we got locked down, what we would do, and I've been in the business a long time. I grew up in a construction family, so I've lived through a number of housing cycles in the state of California. If you had asked me a year ago what would happen in our market out here, I would have said we would have stopped selling everything. The exact opposite happened. And it happened so fast, nobody knew how to deal with it. And as I said, from the new housing side, one, we got shut down in our sales offices, but the construction side of stuff kept going. So we kept guys on the job sites, even in March of last year, May of last year, June of last year. We had guys out hammering, nails and putting up roofing material and, doing whatever their respective trades were. So the market is strong. We're not seeing it necessarily bubble at this point in time. How long will it last? Again, that's a little bit of a forecast, but what we'd like to do is we'd like to get product continue to be back in the pipeline. And as it stands right now, we're going to see a little bit of a lull with new product coming on the market because the existing product has sold out so fast. We're not quite there yet to get new product into it. But 2021, we hope to be a pretty solid year for us again. So, 2020 turned out reasonably okay. So we're hoping 2021 is going to do the same thing.
I think it's going to be great. I'm working from home 2 days a week, but I'm still, reviewing plans. We're doing plan checks, and now everything is moving electronically. So it's moving. We had a few glitches, at the start of the shutdown where we altered our schedules, but the building department, the activity is really just going through the roof, and it's exciting as well.
Yeah, and as I say, it depends on the agency that you're doing business with. Some are, easier to work with. They've moved quicker onto an electronic platform. When we first shut down, we actually had building inspectors, working from home, and a guy on the field trying to get an electrical review by holding a cell phone up to a camera, up to an electrical panel, and then some guy sitting at home with an iPad going, "Okay, that's approved." It was a little crazy, just a little crazy. Some of those glitches have been worked out.
Yes, we have a couple of questions here. Can you see the question?
Let's see. Okay. Let's see. I know I saw something start to come through and then I didn't see it. It kind of went off my screen. I don't know where it went.
Let's see. One is from Abby. She asked.
Oh, I see it. Okay, I got
Okay.
it. So it says, how much water was used by a single family home 20 years ago and in 2021? It seems with the density needs will be reducing single family housing and increasing multifamily. How would you require the industry to build sustainability while removing regulations? Okay, that's two really loaded questions there. All right. First of all, 20 years ago, we were probably close to 1.5 acres or 1.75 acres per house on an annual basis. Now we're down under 1 acre. So because housing has become more efficient, not just in electricity use and gas use and mandates of solar on rooftops, et cetera, water also became an efficiency. So for example, 20 years ago, you didn't have to have low flush toilets. You didn't have to have low access shower heads and things like that. You had stuff that you were flushing and it was 10 gallons of water going down in a toilet versus now it's less than 1 on certain toilets, depending on the type of toilet you have. So the amount of usage is still remaining the same, but the amount of water that's actually going through the system has gotten less because we've had to go to new appliances. The new technology said your water in your shower is going to be different than what it was 20 years ago. Your water pressure is going to be different, et cetera. So that's the difference on water use. The other side of it is that 20 years ago, people weren't worried about how much water they were using. Their water bills weren't high. Conservation was kind of a just getting started type of thing. So people really didn't think about what they needed for their landscaping or how long the kids' shower took or how many loads of laundry they did on a daily basis type of thing. Now people are much more conscious of, one, they don't want to pay the water bill. Number two, they want to be friendly to the environment and be far more conservation. So you're running a full load of wash. You're not doing, 3 pieces of laundry in a washing machine type of situation. So people's lifestyles have also contributed to using less water because they've gotten more efficient with what they are actually using. So that's what's happening in the housing world of usage. Okay. As far as multifamily, sustainable versus single family, it's going to be technology driven is what it's going to be. It's also going to be building code driven. 10 years ago, when solar started really hitting the market, everybody that could afford to do solar jumped on the solar market. And then it became about where the state started legislating a variety of solar mandates. And the first one was to have the new development make it solar ready, which meant we had to install all the components, but we didn't flip the switch. This last building cycle, now we have to have it solar on. So when someone moves into the house, their solar is already on the house, it's connected to the system, and they're actually seeing the benefit of having solar.
I like it. I like that idea. We have one more question from Marlene.
Okay.
She's asking, are the housing number projects inclusive of tribal land? And do you work with tribes on the projects?
The answer to that is yes, to both of them. Yes, those numbers are inclusive because they get those permits from the city. So for example, in Palm Springs, that does include some of the projects that Agua Caliente has gone through. And yes, we do work with the tribe. On my board of directors, I have a tribal staff person from Agua Caliente is on my board of directors. Many of you know him, Todd Hooks. We also have a member from the Mission Springs Water District, Mr. Russ Martin, as well as CVWD with John Powell is on my board of directors. So we work across a variety of both the district's agencies, as well as other representation in the industry itself. So I have trades, I have home builders, I have a variety of different folks on our board of directors. So yeah, we spend a lot of time talking to each other on all of this good stuff.
Awesome. Gretchen, thank you so much.
Yeah,
We
and I know
will-
I talk fast. I know I talk fast, but I will get some follow-up information. I'll share it with Berlinda, and then she can share it back out to the group on some of the
Definitely.
statistical stuff on sales, on how sales are
Definitely.
actually doing.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you so much. Next but not least is Rosalind Prickett. Rosalind is a principal and senior project manager at Woodard and Curran with 22 years of experience in water resource planning, along with environmental compliance and permitting associated with wastewater, recycled water, and water supply projects. She has prepared regional water management plans, groundwater sustainability plans, salt nutrient and management plans, stormwater resources plans, urban water management plans. So you know that there's a lot of planning when it comes to water and water reuse. She is currently working on the Coachella Valley's Indio Sub-Basin Alternative Plan update, leading water demands and supply forecasting, scenario modeling, and stakeholder engagement. Let's welcome Rosalind Prickett.
Thank you, Berlinda. I actually started my career with a degree in city and regional planning from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So when Louis was talking about, general plans, I write urban water management plans, I write water supply assessments. So I understand, how his approvals and
Gretchen's push for housing, water supply, and how we have to document that we have enough. So I am going to sharing my screen.
Okay.
If that's okay.
And I love how your experience and what you're doing now totally integrates. That's awesome.
Sure does. Let me see if I can. Okay, I will be looking at my other screen, but I'm going to talk about water sustainability in Coachella Valley. The Valley, as you all know, has a long history of active local water management. So the Valley essentially has a history of agricultural uses and then started to kind of increase with some urban and municipal growth, which has water demands. Because of the accelerated pumping in the Valley, there were some periods of groundwater overdraft. Essentially, groundwater levels underground started to decline over time with all of the increased pumping, and the water agencies needed to figure out what to do about that. There are a number of different solutions that the agencies have implemented over time. Building a reliable water portfolio takes many different sources. Specifically here in the Valley, the agencies began to capture and recharge whitewater river flows. So essentially, slowing those river flows down and letting those river flows percolate the groundwater base. The Coachella Canal was completed in 1949, which brought Colorado River water to the Valley to essentially help to deliver those farmers in the East Valley without, in lieu of them pumping from the groundwater basin. Coachella Valley Water District and Desert Water Agency then contracted for State Water Project water. That's water coming from the Sierra Nevadas. in 1963. Now that water from the Sierras doesn't actually arrive directly into Coachella Valley. They exchange that water with a couple of other agencies and just receive more Colorado River water in exchange for their Sierra Nevada water. But that led to the construction of replenishment basins, taking that state water project exchange water and recharging the groundwater basin to allow for the increased municipal pumping as growth continued to increase. And then the Mid-Valley Pipeline was constructed in 2009. Now that is a very cool and complex system that delivers canal water, Colorado water, to various farmers, to golf courses, to HOAs for irrigation purposes. But then once it goes up and reaches the Mid-Valley area where the water reclamation plants are, it actually blends canal water with recycled water to deliver to other users up in that portion of the valley. So there really is a very robust and intricate network of supplies that is used in the valley. I'm involved in 3 different water resources planning programs. The first one on the left is the Coachella Valley Integrated Regional Water Management and Stormwater Resources Planning effort. We initiated this in 2010 to essentially document what are the key issues, what kinds of capital projects do we need to serve the valley, and then to document those for the state to bring grant money into the state, or bring state grant money down to the valley to construct those projects. The second one in the center is the Coachella Valley Water Management Plan, which is our Indio Subbasin Alternative Plan. The Water Management Plan was initiated in 1994 when essentially the agencies identified the need to offset some of that groundwater overdraft that was happening. And I'll talk a little bit more about this plan for the rest of my presentation, because this is a really big effort that we're involved in right now, is updating this plan. The last activity that I'm involved in is on the right there. This is the East Coachella Valley Water Supply Project. This was initiated by CVE in 2017. Essentially look at all of the small water systems in the East Valley that are not connected to municipal supply to figure out, are there violations, are there water quality issues that need to be addressed, and how can we essentially extend municipal services, municipal water mains out to those systems and make sure that all of those folks have clean, safe drinking water. So today I will talk about the center one. In 2014, there was an act passed by the California State Legislature called the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. We call it SGMA. And this is essentially a directive from the state that if you have a groundwater basin that is experiencing any kind of overdraft or is prioritized because of the municipal pumping that occurs in that basin, you need to do a better job managing that groundwater basin, manage it to a level where it is sustainable. Only as much water goes in, only as much water comes back out as water goes in. So DWR, the State Department of Water Resources, defined the Indio Subbasin, which is shown here on my map, and the Mission Creek Subbasin as medium priority basins, which essentially means we need to write a groundwater sustainability plan. Oops. Sorry about that. These 4 agencies that you can see here, Desert Water Agency, Indio Water Authority, Coachella Water Authority, and Coachella Valley Water District, are the 4 GSAs for the Indio Subbasin, the groundwater sustainability agencies that are tasked with making sure that this basin remains in a sustainable condition. There is also a groundwater plan being prepared for the Mission Creek Subbasin to the north, which I believe Desert Water Agency, Coachella Valley Water District, and Mission Springs Water District are responsible for. And today, I'll just talk about the Indio Subbasin. These agencies have a history of cooperation. I've been working with them since 2010 on the Integrated Regional Water Management Plan, and we've been collaborating for years. So it just made sense for these agencies to get together and work together on a groundwater plan. So what is sustainable management? According to the state, sustainable management is the use of groundwater in a manner that does not result in these 6 things. This chronic lowering of groundwater levels. We do not want a reduction in groundwater storage. We do not want land subsidence, seawater intrusion, degradation of groundwater quality, or depletion of interconnected surface waters. That means essentially surface habitat areas, vegetation, riparian areas, springs that are dependent on the groundwater aquifer. So the Coachella Valley Water Management Plan, and therefore our alternative plan, which is just a funny name for our groundwater sustainability plan, has 4 major goals: eliminating overdraft, maximizing conjunctive use. That means the shared use of water between surface water supplies and groundwater supplies. That's essentially our replenishment activities that occur, bringing imported Colorado River water in and replenishing the basin. Minimizing adverse economic impacts to water users and minimizing environmental impacts. Here's our plan area. You can see that our plan area is a little bit bigger than the actual Indio subbasin. So we've extended it to include the potential sphere of influence for the Coachella and Indio areas. And we've also included several areas to the south around the edges of the Salton Sea that are served by pumping in the Indio subbasin. So we need to think about the development of housing developments like Gretchen was talking about in all of those plan areas, because those areas are served by pumping, groundwater pumping in the basin. So we need to be attentive to all of those areas. Here's the land uses. We actually used the city's general plan build out mapping to think about, how are water demands going to increase over time. These were all compiled by the Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG, in their 2020 Regional Transportation Plan, which I think Louis talked about a little bit earlier. So we use those to think about, where is development going to occur, at what densities, and how much water is needed to serve them. And then we also have to look at the water management facilities that are in the valley to think about, how is water brought in, how is it conveyed, how is it recharged and then redistributed back out. So we, have on the map here major water supply conveyance and major water sources. You can see the Whitewater River channel here that kind of turns into the Coachella Valley stormwater channel down here. You can see the Coachella Canal that comes up from the Colorado River and brings water to the East Valley, Mid-Valley area, and then the Colorado River Aqueduct, which brings additional Colorado River supplies and delivers it up here to the west end of the valley. So part of what we do in a groundwater management plan is we define a hydrogeologic conceptual model. This is essentially our model for understanding how water moves between surface water and groundwater. So for example, here's a replenishment pond and that water goes down into the groundwater basin. Here's the canal that brings water in and either delivers it to the pond or delivers it to farmers. We've got private wells that pull water back out of the aquifer. We've got recycled water that delivers water to the various, golf courses and other irrigation users. And then of course, the typical hydrologic cycle, which is, rain, snow melt draining down into the basin. So this really just kind of helps us understand how the basin works, where the water moves in and out. So our subbasin inflows and outflows. Groundwater comes in by infiltration from watershed as the water, rains up and then runs off down through some of our creek channels and into the Whitewater River and percolates down into the basin. There are subsurface flows. There's a little bit of exchange of water between the Mission Creek Basin and the Indio Basin. There's of course replenishment activities. Some of the wastewater treatment plants that don't recycle all of their flow percolate that water. And then there's return flow, meaning as you're irrigating your lawn outside in your house, some of that water is uptake by the plants. But there is a little bit of that water that actually percolates down into the basin. So we have to calculate how much of that water that you're using on your outdoor irrigation actually gets back into the groundwater supply. And then there's outflows, which are essentially pumping from wells. There's some, like I said, the exchange between basins, which is what subsurface outflow means. There's drain flows out to the Salton Sea, and then there's evapotranspiration. Here, as part of our hydrogeologic conceptual model, we've developed some sub-basin cross sections. So here is the basin, the Indio sub-basin. And what we've done is we've kind of taken some cuts across the sub-basin, and we've used well completion reports to understand what is happening underground. What does the geology look like underground? So for example, this is the cross section for BB prime, which is this area over here. And you can see that at the start, which is up here kind of toward the mountains, it's very sandy. There's lots of sand and gravel. As it's down into like the middle of the valley, there's a little bit more clay pockets that you can see. And then there's actually a fault line that occurs over toward the top of the cross section over kind of by the Highway 10. So what we've done is we've tried to develop as part of our conceptual model, what does it look like? This helps us understand how the water moves underground and where it goes. So after we have a sense of what our hydrogeologic conceptual model looks like, we have to figure out what are our demands on water, how much water is going to be used in the future. So we understand what the basin looks like, we figure out what our demands are, we compare that to our supplies, and that's kind of the planning process that we're in right now. The municipal demands have a 5-step forecast process. Like I said, we use the SCAG 2020 growth projections as a basis for our forecast. We look at the land use type associated with that because each land use type has a different demand factor. Single family homes have a much higher water use because of their outdoor irrigation than multifamily units. Their indoor demands might be the same. Everybody might use 60 gallons per capita per day, but total demands because of outdoor irrigation are different. So we have to allocate those demands based on the land use category for those vacant parcels. There is a little bit of water loss that happens in the system as water is pumped from the wells and distributed out to the system. There are leaks that occur. So we adjust for that. And then we also have conservation factors that we consider. So when we're looking at water conservation, we try to calculate what kind of conservation is expected in terms of municipal programs. There are indoor water use rebate programs, so programs that essentially switch out your shower heads or your faucets. There's landscaping rebate programs with turf conversions. There is some conservation that occurs just from education and workshops and social change. For golf courses, there are a number of different programs from recycled or non-potable water. So Gretchen was talking earlier about how some of the golf courses are being hooked up to those recycled water systems and they're no longer pumping. And then of course, desert landscaping rebate, which is similar to the turf rebates. And then there's ag conservation. So we adjust for all of these different conservation activities and programs that the agencies are doing. So here's essentially a summary of our projected demands by Groundwater Sustainability Agency, or GSAs. So you can see that some of the agencies like Coachella, City of Coachella is anticipated to increase by 190%. There's a lot of growth anticipated in the CWA service area compared to existing. In CVWD, that's only 39%, but it's 138,000 acre feet of total demand. So that's a lot of demand. So we essentially have rolled up all of that demand forecasting that we've done. These are all draft numbers. We're still working on the planning process, but I wanted to share with you kind of the scale. We also have to project agricultural demands. So we essentially have taken all of the land use mapping and we've looked at where is there agricultural lands that could potentially be developed and where are there agricultural lands where there's planned urbanization, where we expect that there will be housing developments constructed on those areas. There's about 7,000 acres of urbanization that is projected to occur on existing cropped lands. So we essentially have to look at our ag demands and we have to remove all of that, the water use that would be assumed for those 7,000 acres. The forecast for agricultural demands is an increase from a decrease, excuse me, from about 295,000 to about 271,000 acre feet per year. So the valley is anticipating a decrease. Now there's uncertainty associated with that. With all of these basins all over the state doing SGMA and some of them in pretty dire straits with overdraft. Could there be new farmers moving in? Maybe. There's a lot of uncertainty with this. And we will acknowledge all of that in the plan. So here's our total water demand forecast. You can see the municipal bar in blue, the agricultural bar in green, and then golf and other. So a total of about 635,000 acre feet by 2045. The next thing that we have to do is to match the local water demands with supplies. We have to take this demand forecast on the left here, and we have to compare it to the water supply that's available to the valley. And just before I continue, Berlinda, I want to do a time check. Where am I on time?
You are coming up close to the wall.
Okay.
2 minutes.
So I'll speak quickly.
Thank you.
So we've got a supply portfolio for the basin, which includes the, each of the things that I have been talking about: groundwater, state water project exchange water, Colorado River water, recycled water, surface water, and other supplies. I've got a couple of nice little maps to show you. This is essentially a map of ground. I've kind of shown the arrows moving downstream, trying to simulate what happens, as water percolates from the Whitewater River and all of the runoff from the watershed into the basin. We've got the State Water Project water, which comes in through the Colorado River Aqueduct and is recharged up here in the west part of the basin through the Whitewater River Groundwater Replenishment Facility. We've got Colorado River water, which is actually spread throughout the basin. So most of the Colorado River water is brought up through the Coachella Canal here and recharged in the Palm Desert Water Replenishment Facility and the Thomas E. Levy Replenishment Facility. This big arrow is to simulate all of the farming use of current canal water, which is direct delivery of that canal water. And then CVWD has as an exchange with another agency to deliver just a little bit of their Colorado River supply up to Whitewater River. We've got surface water supplies, which are essentially direct diversions of surface water from those creeks to users in the Desert Water Agency service area. The rest of it is essentially accounted for in that groundwater number that I showed you earlier because it percolates. And then recycled water. Here's an image of the three water treatment plants, water reclamation plants that recycle water and deliver it out to various irrigation customers. And then of course the Mid-Valley Pipeline, which has that kind of mix, that blend of canal water and recycled water. And then there's a couple of other supplies generally that if they are developed, so the CVWD does have agreements for Yuba Accord and Rosedale Rio Bravo water that are delivered up to Whitewater River. There could be construction of some additional facilities on the State Water Project system that could add additional water to Whitewater River. And we're kind of working through all those numbers at this point with the GSAs during the planning process. Here's our draft forecast. So as you can see, I've kind of compiled all of these different supply sources into a projection of what our supply portfolio is going to look like through 2045. And we're in the process right now of essentially evaluating those demands against those supplies. A combination of management actions is of course needed. We need to continue replenishing stormwater and imported water. There's no doubt about that. And the list of projects in the groundwater, in the alternative plan will reflect these proposed projects. There's of course continued use of non-potable water, canal water and recycled water for irrigation. And then of course, conservation is a big slice of that pie. As we compare our demands to our supplies, any gap needs to be made up with conservation programs and measures. So is our alternative plan working? As I said, the first plan started in the 90s and was published in I think 2002. there had been a decline in groundwater conditions over time, which essentially bottomed out generally about 2009. So implementing that plan in 2002 really did make a difference. And all of the supply diversification projects that have been going on in the valley have been helping to essentially flatten out or even increase groundwater levels and storage in the valley. And so part of what we're doing with this alternative plan is we are showing that if we continue to develop these projects, we can balance the groundwater basin. We can make sure that there is no overdraft conditions and that all of our municipal wells can access groundwater sustainably to serve our communities. So we have a couple of questions to be answered through our planning process. We are working on these questions right now. What conditions or factors could affect future demands and supplies? That's that uncertainty I was talking about. Are there any new projects or actions we need to think about? And what goals or criteria are appropriate? We're in that, let's define specifically what level is sustainable for Coachella Valley, for the Indio Subbasin. We're gonna have a workshop in next week, March 3rd from 2 to 4 o'clock. So if anyone is interested in hearing more details about the alternative planning process, I would love to see you at our workshop next week. And then if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Rosalind, thank you so much. That was
You're
so
welcome.
awesome. That was really good. I mean, even though I know this stuff, is still really good to get a refresh. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Any questions from the attendees? I don't see anything in the Q&A.
That was all clear, huh?
Okay, okay. Thank you. Thank you again.
You're so
We appreciate
welcome.
that. Okay. So let's see. We're going to talk about the class lineup next week, folks, is the virtual tour. The agencies have been working on, putting together a virtual tour of our facilities. So please come back next week to check those out. And the survey reminder, we really do want to hear from you. We think we have some really great ideas, but we can always get new ones and more refreshing ones. So thank you very much for attending. We will see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Belinda. You have a